let's continue talking about emotional eating.
Okay, so how about we frame this video around the 4 ways to break the pattern of emotional eating.
That's a good one.
You did not check out one of our previous videos, we did a whole video on the 6 stages of the domino effect of emotional eating, what causes it, and all, like, you know, from the trigger and all of the events that happen afterwards. So this is kind of, you know, a follow-up video where we can talk about how to actually break that pattern, where to break the pattern, and how you can start to get more of a grasp on your issue of emotional eating.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like 4 things that we want to cover in being able to break this pattern, right? Do you want to kind of like give like the overview of that, and then we can kind of dive into each one?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're looking at breaking the pattern of emotional eating, it's really going to come down to these 4 things. So number 1, you're going to want to put more resistance between you and the habit. Number 2, you're going to want to buy yourself some time. Number 3, you're going to want to change your environment. And number 4, you're going to want to change the reward.
If you checked out our last video on the 6 stages of that domino effect of emotional eating, you'll understand that where we really need to break the pattern is between, you know, the steps 2 and 3, like where the trigger happens and where we get that quick dopamine hit from like instant gratification, right? So this is where, like Melissa said, you know, we really need to make sure that we're able to create resistance, buy ourselves some time, and we're going to talk about a couple of different strategies about how we can implement that.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, at the end of the day, being able to overcome emotional eating really comes down to a behavioral change. And so many of us, we're just operating on autopilot all the time, like literally, I mean, throughout every single day. And it's something that you always talk about, like in an example of like the power goes out in the house, and you know the power is out, like it's fucking dark, and you still walk into the room and you turn the light switch on, or like, you know, you're not supposed to flush the toilet and you pee, and like there's a ton of pee in the toilet and you just continue to flush it, and like you're like, oh shit, but like you're not even thinking of these things. And it's the same exact thing that happens with emotional eating, is if you're not able to identify like the trigger or like the pattern or like get ahead of it, you're not going to be able to stop it, because you're just kind of functioning on autopilot, and like you're kind of just automatically emotionally eating without thinking about it.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into like our whole lives are, you know, predicated on that fact of us operating on autopilot, right? Our brains are trying to process a billion different things at once, and so your brain likes, you know, repeatable patterns. It likes to create those kind of loops that it follows day in and day out and day in and day out, and it likes to connect, like, you know, point A to point B, and just continually follow that same circuit, because it makes life a lot more efficient for your brain. You don't have to waste as much like brain power to process every single thing that's happening in your life. Like Melissa said, we kind of operate on autopilot, and your brain continues to look for those particular and predictable patterns. So emotional eating in most cases is like a predictable and particular pattern that you take an isolated incident of, I'm super stressed, and you marry that with an action of, I reach for a bag of chips. And so if you've done it once, okay, that's an isolated incident, right? I'm stressed, I reach for the bag of chips, I did those 2 things in sequence. But then it happens the second time.
Well, like, what about the instance of, you know, someone coming home and every single night, without fail, they're good all day, and then they put their kids to bed and they're able to finally sit down on the couch and enjoy and watch some TV, and every single night you're diving into the bag of chips and eating it, and it's almost like a mindless thing of like you're just doing it to like relieve some sort of stress from the day.
Right, and it's really those 2 things of tying those 2 like separate actions together. My kids are in bed, I can finally relax, so that's an emotion, right? Like I'm ready to relax, and I'm tying it to the action of sitting on the couch and eating a bag of chips or whatever it is. And so again, it's looking at 2 isolated actions or emotions or incidents. They don't have anything to do with each other, but through repetitive behavior, we are continually tying the 2 together. It's a really similar idea of like, right, if you decide to like ride your bike down a dirt path, right, and you continue to ride it down the same path day in and day out, eventually you're going to create a pretty deep groove in that path. It's the same kind of thing with your habits, right? The more that we continue to do the same thing and tie those 2 events together, the deeper the groove is that we're creating in that path, the more likely we are to ride down that path whenever that first event occurs.
Right. And so this is really the first way to break that pattern, right? So how are we able to create that resistance between that bad habit that we're doing?
It really comes down to like what you said, right? Creating as much resistance between you and the habit as possible. You need to buy yourself some time to not like automatically marry those two things together. You need to give yourself some time to consciously think about, okay, well, this happened. What am I going to do next? Instead of just doing it on autopilot, right? Like you said, lights are dark, the power's out, lights are dark, you walk into the room, try to turn the light on, you do it on autopilot. It's just something that your brain has become accustomed to doing. Same thing with emotional eating. You're stressed, you reach for the bag of chips. Well, how do we get yourself to a point to think, I'm stressed, do I consciously want to reach for that bag of chips? And that's like the first thing, is creating as much resistance as possible. So let's talk about some ways that we can create resistance. So like number one, we need to buy yourself some time, right? Give yourself some time in between action number one and action number two, or emotion number one and the subsequent action.
And I think this kind of goes back to like the very first thing we've talked about in this whole emotional eating series, is being able to identify the trigger. And that trigger is any kind of emotion that you're feeling. So, whether you're frustrated, you're stressed, you're angry, you're excited, you're happy, like you feel relieved, whatever it is, you want to be able to identify that as a trigger. Like that's my emotion that I'm feeling. So when you're feeling any kind of emotion like that, like physically set a timer. We tell our clients that all the time, like go set the timer on the microwave or like on your phone, whatever it is, set the timer for 5 to 10 minutes and go do something that is just really simple. You can put an audiobook on, you can listen to a podcast, like call your sister, call a friend, go play with your kids that are whining, like fold some laundry that's definitely been in the dryer for way too long, like mine. There's a lot of things that you can do to kind of, buy yourself that time between the emotion and then that instant gratification reward of having that food that probably will make you feel like shit afterwards.
What you said, right, about buying time, you're like, why do I have to set the timer for 5 to 10 minutes? It all goes back to what we were saying before about like trying to undo those automatic, associations. Stressed, bag of chips, automatically associated. With this, by setting a timer, like Melissa said, you're realizing the trigger, I'm stressed. You're giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes to be like, okay, I'm going to make a conscious decision over that next 5 to 10 minutes and assess my feelings. Is it something that I really want? Why am I choosing that specifically? How am I going to feel afterwards? Buying yourself time gives you the opportunity to assess your situation and reflect on the action that you're about to take. It's not just like okay, stress, grab the bag of chips, right? Like you're not operating like an animal anymore, essentially, right? You're not operating on autopilot anymore. By setting that timer, taking your mind off of that automatic habit that comes from your trigger, you're giving yourself, that opportunity to decide, is that really something I want to do? And we tell our clients all the time, give yourself the 5 to 10 minutes. If you decide in that 5 to 10 minutes after you've thought through the entire situation, you've assessed the entire situation, and you've thought about how you're going to feel afterwards, if you still decide, I really want that bag of chips, go have the bag of chips.
Yeah. The third thing you're going to want to do is just change your environment. So that can be as simple as if you get home and the bag of chips or the cookies are like the first thing that you see when you open your cabinet, like move it to the back of the cabinet. That way you're like also creating that resistance between like you and the chips. Like you actually have to stick your hand back while you're doing the action of sticking your hand all the way to the back of the pantry to try to reach for the chips. During that time, you can process, is this actually worth the hassle of me getting this? I know I shouldn't be doing it, versus just opening it, you're not thinking about it, you're grabbing the chips and eating it.
Yeah.
So it does kind of like creates the resistance, it buys you time, and you're just changing the actual like environment of where the chips are.
I like to think of it too, like, so I used to keep a bottle of wine, like when you open the fridge door, it's kind of like right there, like right by the milk, right? And like, you're stressed, you open the fridge door, you go to grab the bottle of wine, like you know where it is, you don't have to think about it, just like you know where the light switch is when you walk in a room. So if that's kind of like your habit, like exactly what you just said, I open it up, I go to grab it, and it's not there anymore. What does that do? It buys me time. Yeah. I have to pause and be like, well, shit, where did I put the wine? Oh, it's all the way at the back of the fridge?
Yeah.
Right?
Like change the environment of the physical like food or drink or whatever it is that you are emotionally eating.
Yeah.
I think another thing can be like, let's say, you know, you're at work and like typically you know that you get home and you put your sweatpants on, you sit on the couch and like you grab something that's comforting for food. Instead of doing that, like put your sweatpants on and go outside for a walk for like 5 minutes. And then if you still come in and like you're still like genuinely hungry, then you know that's physical hunger. Like you're not just sitting there going through the motions and like automatically emotionally eating because you want to relieve stress.
Yeah, that reminds me of like one of our clients. I think that was exactly her problem, right? She would have a really stressful day at work. Like you said, she'd kind of come home, change her clothes, and she'd plop down on the couch. And she always associated plopping down on the couch with actually grabbing a bag of chips or ordering something from Seamless. And like that was like what her emotional tie was, because she's like, I'm finally sitting down, it gives me that opportunity to relax, to de-stress, and now I'm gonna like think about something yummy to eat, right? But if you think back to that instant gratification thing, it's like, okay, I'm finally like de-stressed. What am I going to do to make myself feel better now to kind of help relieve the stress? So you're looking for that dopamine hit, pulling up your phone and ordering Grubhub, right? Like,
I just think it's like really important, like in all of this, is like we're, as humans, like we're creatures of habit, and so like if you continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, that just becomes part of your lifestyle, and it's not necessarily something that like you're even conscious of, like you're just doing it. And so that's why like we're really kind of hammering the point of like start to write it down, like collect the data on how you're operating your day to day, and then you can start making small changes. And it doesn't have to be something drastic where like you don't have chips at all. It's more of like, are you coming home, sitting on the couch, grabbing the chips because it's something habitual? Or are you coming home, going for a walk, setting a timer, doing something else to break that pattern, and then coming in and saying, you know what, like I'm still gonna have it and I can eat it and I want it and I'm hungry.
It's like, take your power back, right? Like stop just being like a product of your environment and a product of your routine. Take your power back, assess your situation, have some more awareness of like, do I just do this because this is what I've always done, or do I actually want it? So yeah, to me it's like almost like reclaiming your power, right?
Exactly.
Your power over the situation. And then like tying back into too, like changing, you know, your environment. One thing that I found particularly helpful is, so like being in the kitchen, when I'm really hungry, being in the kitchen can be like a huge trigger, because all of the food is all around you, and it's literally like I can grab the box of crackers that are, you know, sitting on the counter and just start eating those, or the bag of chips or whatever it is. So when I start to get in like that emotional state and I realize that, okay, I've been triggered somehow, I'm able to, like one of the most helpful things, like you said about changing your environment, physically leave the room. So I will like go into my bedroom or, you know, go into the office and like, you know, try to organize a couple of things. Like you said, the laundry room, go fold your clothes, do something to get yourself out of the environment where like you're prone to engage in that habit. The fourth thing that you're going to want to do is figure out how you change your reward. Right, so if you watched our video on the 6 stages of emotional eating, like that domino effect, you realize that, you know, we're kind of looking at that food, whatever it is, ice cream, cookies, cake, as a promised reward. Remember, like we're all like always rewards driven as humans, right? So we're always looking for what is the promised reward that's going to give me that quick dopamine hit and make me feel better. In the case of emotional eating, it's food. So again, when we create those habitual patterns of like, here's the emotion and here's a subsequent action, we start to tie in, okay, I know when I'm stressed and I open that bag of chips, that's my promised reward. That's going to give me the dopamine hit. It's quick relief, right? So what do we need to do? Like, what's another thing that we can do to give ourselves that hope of a promised reward that's not going to be food? We just need to change the reward, right?
It's funny that like we're actually filming this today because I saw something on Instagram that someone put up, and it was like the quicker I moved from saying I can't wait, like I really need a drink after this day, to like I really need to lift after this day, or like go to the gym after this day. Like even the way that you talk to yourself and saying those things of like, oh, like I really need a drink, or like, oh my god, I just need to go like work out, like those things are like small changes. Like that's a different reward, and that's something that I think like both of us can relate to, of like we used to do that. Like I used to feel that way of like I can't wait to like be done with the day and be able to like have a glass of wine and just relax. Now it's I cannot wait to be done with the day, put my gym clothes on and go work out and lift really, really heavy. So it's those small things of like that come with time of just kind of changing your habits. It changes your lifestyle. The gym or whatever it is, whether, it's, your reward is like reading a book for 10 minutes. Like, it can be small things that just make you feel fulfilled and happy. And you can just kind of swap out like the food and the cookie is my reward for something else that also like makes you feel good inside.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with a client about a week ago, and she was like, I don't know like what to swap out for a reward. Like, food has just always been my go-to. What do I swap out for a reward? And I'm like, well, what makes you feel happy? Like, there's other instances that make you feel happy, that make you feel excited or relaxed or you look forward to. Is it a new book you're reading? Is it a podcast that you're listening to? Is it, a particular album, music, like something like a playlist on Spotify that you're like, I really love that and that like makes me feel so hyped up? Is it a shower? Is it a walk? Like, what is it that makes you like, I really enjoy doing that? That's what you can start to swap out for rewards. So I'm really stressed. Instead of coming home, ripping open the bag of chips, I'm really stressed. I'm going to go take like a hot shower, like put some aromatherapy in there, maybe light a candle, and that's going to be my reward. And over time, you're not going to keep riding your bike down that same path. You're going to be able to find a different path, and that's okay because your brain will start to rewire itself to create that new like reward circuit that's tied to, oh, that shower and candle is really going to help me relax. I think the biggest thing too that we need to remember, like as we're navigating this journey of emotional eating, is just because you're like, okay, I understand that there's a domino effect. I understand where I need to break the trigger, like the trigger to the quick fix. Like, I understand all of it. Doesn't mean that like it's going to happen overnight. There's still something to be said for practical application. And there are still going to be times that you fall back into that same like pattern.
Yeah, I think it's just like anything else of like, it's at first it's going to take time of like putting in the reps and being very conscious of it, and then over time it's just going to become habitual for you.
And there are still times, right, that like we're super stressed and like grab for chocolate,
but like at least like you're aware of it.
You're aware, right? And we have like the tools in our toolbox to understand like, I'm feeling stressed. I gave myself the 5 minutes, right? I made a conscious decision of, do I want this? Do I not want this? Okay, I really want it, so then I'm going to go have it. And again, it's really just about taking back your power, creating more awareness about your habits. That way you're not living your life on autopilot.
And I think it's also important to just kind of say, like, in all of this emotional eating, like, this is always going to resurface at some point in your life. Like, it's a really hard thing to break. And so just be patient with yourself. And I think, like, it is progress in just acknowledging it. Like, that's the first step. Just acknowledge it, that like, this is when it happens, this is the pattern, and okay, I'm gonna try to take steps to break it. And eventually you'll get to the point where it happens, once in a while, and it's not all the time, and that's okay, because we all go through that as humans. Cool. Good. Okay. New video.